The story begins with a shy boy who has a quality like that of an anaconda in a zoo, but before we get to that juicy moment, we must start from the beginning. That day, Kim Han's shoelaces were untied, and the traffic lights turned red in front of him. Due to the school inspection that he normally didn't do, his name was written on the main door. Kim Han approached one of the teachers, firmly stating that his hair was natural. The teacher, surprised, asked if natural brown hair was that bright, and hinted that he had dyed it, mentioning that he had already memorized his name, Kim Han-yeol, first year, second class. In his mind, Kim Han reflected that on his unfortunate days, there was always a face he saw. At that moment, the teacher called another boy, Seo Juyeon, asking him to come closer to mark his attendance. Kim Han stared, surprised, thinking about how they always stopped Juyeon at the door because of his bangs. He couldn't believe he was so stubborn, even after being scolded. At that moment, Kim Han watched as the teacher gave Seo a light hit with a notebook, and Seo, noticing Kim Han's gaze, looked back at him. Kim Han told himself that he knew it. Whenever he encountered Seo, it was a bad day. Then, his friends approached and asked why he had said he was late, commenting that because of that, he had bad luck. They remembered that the last time he had arrived at school all wet because the dryer had suddenly broken down. Frustrated, Kim Han replied that he didn't know and asked them to leave before his bad luck changed. One of his friends joked that if that were possible, he would have changed already. The friends laughed among themselves while Kim Han thought they were annoying and wondered if they were really friends. One of them gave him a light punch on the cheek, and Kim Han asked him to let go. His friends, laughing, told him that he would have to do the cleaning today for arriving late. Kim Han, surprised, exclaimed why he had to do it. His friend reminded him that he had already said before that whoever arrived late that week would do the cleaning. Relieved that he only had to clean that week, Kim Han thanked them, although deep down he knew he couldn't escape his fate. With a sigh of frustration, he exclaimed that he couldn't believe it. After class, Kim Han ran into Seo and thought that, now that he reflected on it, he had also arrived late that day. He realized that he had been applying himself throughout the first year and that they had crossed paths many times since the beginning of the semester, although they had never spoken. He didn't like interacting with such a gloomy boy. He remembered that they met on the day of the entrance ceremony when he arrived late and ran out, at which point he saw Seo Juyeon for the first time. He greeted him, but was ignored. At that moment, Seo, with his gloomy attitude, swept near Kim Han's feet, covering him in dirt. Kim Han wondered if that was on purpose, especially since he had washed his pants the day before. He then shouted at Seo that he had all that trash on his pants and asked if he didn't sweep well. Seo, hesitating, apologized. Kim Han thought he had been a bit harsh, but then, after a while, exclaimed that everything was clean. Seeing Seo, he felt a little sorry for himself and told him that he had done a good job. However, not receiving a response from Seo, he wondered if he was purposely ignoring him and if he would really have to clean with someone like that for a week. With a sigh, he decided to leave first. Seo quietly replied that yes, they would see each other tomorrow, calling him by his last name, Han-yeol. As the days went by, Kim Han realized that only a week had passed. His friends asked him why he looked so bad since Monday morning. Kim Han, somewhat frustrated, explained that he had been splashed with water on the way, that the day they served his favorite side dish, it ran out just when it was his turn, that he accidentally dropped money and it went down the drain, and that the teacher had told him he would have to keep cleaning until vacation, which extended for another 3 weeks. He felt as if he were under a spell, as if it were a curse. His friends, surprised, asked if he had dreamed of a ghost or something like that, questioning what was happening to him these days. Kim Han, with a tone of resignation, mentioned that all of this had happened because he was on the same shift as Seo Juyeon. One of his friends asked if there was anyone else cleaning besides him, referring to Seo. Kim Han confirmed that he was on the shift with Seo Juyeon. His friend, surprised, recalled that Seo was a first-year student who had broken a window at the beginning of the semester. Although he hadn't seen it, he had heard rumors about the incident. Kim Han was shocked to hear that there was such a rumor. His friend said he wasn't interested in those things, but Kim Han, in his mind, remembered that at the beginning of the semester, Seo had broken the hallway window and had stayed there with his hands covered in blood. The atmosphere had been terrifying, and since then, It was said that if you made eye contact with Seo, you would have bad luck. There was a dark rumor that if you got involved for no reason, things would turn violent. Kim Han reflected on what he had heard and wondered if Seo was really such a bad guy. His friend commented that his luck was so bad these days that, as he had said, it could be Seo's fault. Kim Han hesitated, wondering if that was true. His friend suggested that he join the theater club, mentioning that Seo was the younger brother of Seo Dubion, the director of the theater department. Kim Han, surprised, remembered that he had mentioned it once. His friend reminded him that the theater department at their school was famous, and Kim Han nodded, knowing that his friend said that every day. His friend continued explaining that it was really difficult to get into the theater club, that there were many people trying to join, and that he had no role to play there, he was just taking up space. Kim Han, thoughtful, concluded that Seo didn't seem like a bad person. Last Friday, while Kim Han was sweeping the floor, he thought that tomorrow was already the weekend. At that moment, Seo interrupted him, apologizing. Kim Han was surprised to hear Seo speak first. Seo explained that he was preparing a play in his club and was practicing his performance, so he asked for help. Kim Han, surprised, asked if he was in the theater club. In his mind, he vaguely remembered what Lee Jin had explained about the theater department and wondered why Seo was suddenly asking for his help. Despite his surprise, he felt curious about the skills of the famous theater club. Finally, he told Seo that it was fine, but that he would only help when it was time to clean, asking what he could do. Seo handed him a script and suggested they practice, asking if he would play the role of the girl. Kim Han, seeing the script, agreed and said he could do it, introducing himself as Ling. Seo, excited, began to act and asked if he knew one thing, addressing Ling. As Kim Han remembered last Friday, he was sweeping the floor and thought that tomorrow was already the weekend. At that moment, Seo interrupted with a trembling, high-pitched voice, starting to read a script. Kim Han, upon hearing his voice, thought it was really the worst, questioning whether his high expectations were the problem. Seeing Seo with his head down and reading softly, he wondered what was up with that bangs. He then told Seo that if it was going to be like that, why had he asked for help? He asked him to fix his hair, so they could see each other's eyes and face each other. Seo, realizing the situation, apologized. That memory of Kim Han with Seo led him to comment to his friends that he didn't seem like a bad person. His friends, surprised, asked if he had threatened him, reminding him that they had been friends since middle school and questioning if there was any secret between them. Kim Han, a bit hesitant, asked them to wait while he tried to explain. One of his friends mentioned that he liked the older Juyeon, and Kim Han reminded him that he had said that on his own. At that moment, the class bell rang, and he couldn't talk about what had happened with Seo Juyeon. In his mind, he remembered that since he was young, he had been told he was cute, something he had liked at first but had become annoying over time. He had gotten used to being admired for his appearance, but it repulsed him. At that instant, one of his friends interrupted, calling his attention and showing him a photo. Kim Han asked what was going on, and his friend told him that the older Juyeon was the main model for a brand, asking if he had turned off his phone. Kim Han assured him that he had, explaining that it was an air system. Another friend, wearing glasses, commented that Juyeon shone and wondered if there were people like that in the world, adding that he was a senior at their school. Kim Han, looking at the photo, thought that Seo Juyeon was handsome, while his younger brother, Seo Juyeon, was somewhat cute. His friend told him that his face was red and asked if he also recognized the face of the older Juyeon, assuring him that everyone at school knew him. Kim Han, somewhat embarrassed, insisted that it wasn't true. His friend, excited, said he would do everything possible to get him a spot in the fan club, but Kim Han preferred not to talk about it and suggested that if he was feeling unwell, he should go to the nurse's office. Kim Han replied that he was fine, although he thought it would be better to be sick. After class, he saw Seo outside and thought about the rumors surrounding him, remembering that they said he had broken a window. He noticed that Seo's hands were clean and nice-looking, even seeming to match his face. He recalled that it was said that making eye contact with him brought bad luck, and that getting involved for no reason could be violent. At that moment, Seo looked at him and asked if something was wrong. Kim Han, nervous, replied that it was nothing, wondering why Seo always turned around every time he looked at him. Kim Han reflected in his mind on whether the rumor he had heard was true, feeling that he had been dealing with it since he met Seo. He paused for a moment, thinking that this made him more aware of Seo Juyeon. That night, he had a nearly wet dream about Seo, but he was awakened by his sister's voice, who told him that mom had asked him to wake up for breakfast. She urged him to get up quickly, warning him that if he didn't come out, she would eat everything. Kim-han thought that even in his dreams, Seo was there, and he wondered why he had dreamed about the acting practice. He reflected that his life wouldn't change significantly. He went to school as always, attended classes, did cleaning sometimes, and helped with acting practice when he had time. He realized that they only saw each other in the morning or after school, questioning whether that was okay. The next day, he ran into Seo and asked him what was going on lately, reminding him that he hadn't even noticed at the beginning of the semester. He wondered if he should dye his hair. Seo, surprised, replied that he shouldn't dye it. Kim-han, somewhat annoyed, asked who he was to tell him what to do, feeling that it sounded ridiculous. Despite that, he insisted that it didn't matter what he did with his hair, and that it was Seo who should do it since he dealt with that bangs every morning. Seo, hesitating, could only respond that it was fine. Kim-han, feeling more sincere, told him that he thought he was handsome and that it was a shame he hid it. At that moment, a sudden rain began, forcing both of them to seek shelter. Kim-han, soaked, complained about the rain, wondering why it was suddenly raining. He thought that since it was raining, they could skip cleaning and ask Seo if he didn't have an umbrella. He offered to lend him his, assuring him that his house was nearby and that it wouldn't take long if he ran. Seo, hesitating, asked if he could take him to the bus stop. Kim-han, surprised, wondered why him, but ultimately accepted, feeling that the light on Seo's face made him doubt his decision. Seo, worried about Kim-han getting wetter, offered him his shirt to prevent him from getting soaked. Kim-han, somewhat reluctant, told him it was fine, but Seo insisted, assuring him that he didn't want him to get wet. Kim-han, seeing Seo's expression, felt unable to refuse. As he put on Seo's sweater, he thought he had believed he had a body similar to his. At that moment, Seo pushed Kim-han aside to avoid a puddle of water. Kim-han, surprised, asked him why he was blushing, feeling it was embarrassing. He complained that, besides that, the umbrella was small, which made their shoulders keep touching and their feet get tangled. He regretted only bringing one umbrella. Upon arriving home, Kim-han reflected that he had somehow managed to take Seo there, but he immediately slipped away. However, he noticed something strange. Something felt heavy. He realized that the umbrella had gotten caught in his clothes. With a sigh, he realized that he had forgotten to return it to Seo. After that, Kim-han found himself in class wanting to eat with Seo, but he noticed that every time he was with him, the atmosphere became unhappy, as if Seo was weighing down the environment with his aura. From that day on, Kim-han avoided Seo Juyeon. He woke up earlier than usual to go to school. As soon as the bell rang, he headed to lunch and cleaned in another area during cleaning time. He knew that this didn't mean he could avoid him forever. At that moment, Seo was about to say something to him, but Kim-han interrupted, pointing out that it seemed that part wasn't cleaned well. Seo touched his shoulder, but Kim-han stepped away and told him that he thought he had already finished cleaning and that he could go back first. Seo, somewhat discouraged, accepted. Kim-han wondered why he was looking at him like that. One day, after having managed to avoid him somehow, Kim-han hoped not to run into Seo again. He remembered that the guy who came before him was ready to clean. He tried to avoid him, but for some reason, Seo approached first. His reaction was to dodge him and hide even more. The last time, Seo seemed to have something important to say to him, and Kim-han was very hesitant, remembering that face. He was starting to get nervous. Now that he thought about it, he realized it was already late and wondered why Seo wasn't coming. Cleaning was something he used to do even when he was sick. He worried, wondering if something had happened or if Seo had gotten sick again. He felt frustrated, thinking it was a nuisance. At that moment, the older Juyeon appeared and asked him what was bothering him so much. Kim-han, surprised by her presence, replied that he was wondering why she was there. One day, after having managed to avoid him somehow, Kim-han hoped not to run into Seo again. He remembered that the guy who came before him was ready to clean. He tried to avoid him, but for some reason, Seo approached first. His reaction was to dodge him and hide even more. The last time, Seo seemed to have something important to say to him, and Kim Han was very hesitant, remembering that face. He was starting to get nervous. Now that he thought about it, Kim Han realized it was already late and wondered why Seo wasn't coming. He remembered that cleaning was something Seo used to do even when he was sick, and he worried, wondering if something had happened or if Seo had gotten sick again. He felt frustrated, thinking it was a nuisance. At that moment, the older Juyeon approached and asked him what was bothering him so much. Kim Han, surprised, replied that he was wondering why she was there. Juyeon explained that it was club day and that they had to rehearse in the auditorium, so they were moving the props. Seeing him on the way, she decided to come. Kim Han, upon hearing this, realized it was club day and asked if Seo Juyeon was also there. Juyeon confirmed that he had been absent a lot lately, but he had told her to come today. Kim Han felt relieved, thinking that nothing had happened and that he had worried for nothing. Juyeon offered to go see him, suggesting that if it bothered him, it was okay. However, in his mind, Kim Han remembered that he had promised not to run into Seo. He told himself that he wasn't doing it because he was worried, but because he had decided to move on. Juyeon thanked him for bringing the things, and Kim Han, feeling indecisive, decided that he would just take a look and then leave. He observed that this was where they practiced, and wondered if Seo Juyeon had ever practiced there. He remembered that sometimes he and Seo practiced separately after school, so he thought it would be better to ask. Finally, he asked Juyeon if Seo Juyeon also participated in the theater club practice. Juyeon replied that his participation was low, but it was better than when he was a child. Kim Han, intrigued, asked about his childhood. Juyeon began to tell Kim Han that both she and her brother had received their parents' attention. For her, it was fine, but she assumed it wasn't for Juyeon. She recalled that he once ruined a play when he was a child, and since that day, he had closed himself off. She asserted that he definitely had talent, and that he was too good to waste it. Everything improved a lot after middle school. Juyeon started talking to her and became interested in acting. Kim Han, surprised, asked if it was okay to hear that kind of family story. Juyeon replied that if there was a moment like that, she would bother him again, but she wondered why Juyeon hadn't come to the auditorium, as she was sure she had seen him in the club room. Then, she called Haun and asked if she knew where Juyeon was. Haun, in a carefree tone, commented that since he had been ignoring the scripts, she believed he had taken charge. The older girl, somewhat worried, exclaimed that it shouldn't take so long if they were just moving things. Then she turned to Kim Han and told him that Juyeon had come all the way there to see her and asked what he should do. She suggested that it would be a good idea if he could go help. Kim Han, feeling indecisive, finally accepted, saying he would do it. He added that he just wanted to see his face, as hearing about the past made him feel bad. He wondered how he had ended up in a club that wasn't his, and decided that he would tell Juyeon to go to the auditorium and then leave. As Kim Han opened a door, he heard a commotion and wondered if they were fighting. Peeking inside, he saw one of his friends in the room, pointing at Seo Juyeon and exclaiming that he was the one responsible. His friend reprimanded Seo for not being honest, accusing him of having done it. The tension in the air was palpable, and Kim Han felt uncomfortable witnessing the confrontation.